In Newfoundland, Canada, there is a small community called Glovertown. It's a small outport community with a population of approximately 2,080 people. In the early 1920s, there was a pulp and paper mill being built in the town. It was set to open in 1922, but due to some problems encountered during the construction phase, the mill never did get completed. Today, all that stands there is a concrete structure that will never be completed. The building has become a popular hangout, known to the locals as the Old Mill. The mill's become home for many things, including providing a place for the high school kids to get drunk on the weekends. Due to the privacy of the location, it also offers a popular spot for teenagers in their parents' cars looking for a place to park with their significant others or to get high. However, tonight, I'm not writing this to tell the stories of underage drinking, pot smoking, or the local hookup place. I'm writing this to tell the story of the local legend known as Red Eyes. It was early summer 1921, and the mill was due to open the following year. Construction was in full swing, and many people from all over the world flocked to our small town to work on this project. Most of the workers resided in houses the company had built near the construction site. Transportation back then was limited, so most workers brought their families to live with them in these houses. This story in particular is about one of the workers who we will call John. This wasn't his real name though, but for the purpose of my story, we'll refer to him by this name. So John lived in one of the smaller houses near the river. His wife and daughter loved it there because they could swim in the river on the warmer days. One summer's evening, John and his family did exactly that. They went down to the sandy river shore so that John's daughter could swim in the shallow shoreline, while John and his wife watched at a safe distance. John's wife was an artist, so she would often sketch their little girl while she played in the water and made sandcastles in the mud. The warm summer's evening was slowly cooling off, which was common in central Newfoundland. John's wife had asked him to go back to their close-by house to get warmer clothes for their daughter for when she got out of the water. He quickly hurried up to the rocky path to their home to retrieve a sweater for her. When John left the house, he could hear screaming off in the distance towards where he had left his wife and daughter. John ran quickly back down the path towards the water, and when he got there, he seen his wife frantic on the shoreline, screaming for their daughter to come back into the slower water. When John looked, his daughter had waded out too far into the rougher water, and he knew she couldn't swim against the strong currents. John's wife never knew how to swim, so she was left paralyzed on the shore, unable to save their daughter. He quickly pulled off his boot and began to wade into the water towards their daughter. And to paint a picture of this scene, the river is only a few hundred feet wide at the most. It's fairly narrow, but the currents in the area are really strong, which is why the area was so appealing for a pulp and paper mill. There were many concrete pillars put across the river so that workers could use them to aid in the process of catching the logs that were floated down the river by the workers upstream. John's daughter was planning on swimming out to one of those pillars, but she never realized just how strong the currents really were. John begins to swim towards his daughter, and he begins to struggle to swim in the fast waters. By the time he gets near, he sees his daughter's head go below the surface. From the shore, John's wife is bawling hysterically and feeling helpless as she watches her only daughter go under the water. And a few seconds later, John went under trying to find her. Sadly, neither one of them resurfaced. The following days, the company had halted all production to grieve for their coworker and their daughter. Since there was a tight deadline on the mill, production resumed rather quickly. Over the duration of the year, there were a lot more bizarre occurrences during construction. There were incidents where random objects would fall from the higher levels of the mill, as if someone had purposely thrown them. The only problem was there was no one working on the higher levels at that time, and it resulted in several close calls with the workers almost getting their skulls cracked open by falling objects. The workers just figured it was unsecured materials left on the upper decks by mistake and never thought any more of it. A few weeks later, things got a little more serious. During lunch break, one of the supervisors had stayed behind while his crew had gone to lunch. He was doing a few spot checks on the concrete work from that morning when he heard someone crying in a section of the mill known as the Two Doors. This was an unfinished room that had no lighting, so the supervisor thought it was odd for somebody to be there. He figured that maybe it was one of his workers in there, either playing a joke on him, or maybe they were upset and needed some privacy. Either way, he was concerned, so he went into the Two Doors to check to see who was in there. A few minutes later, his crew was disrupted from their break by an unforgettable shriek coming from the Two Doors. But by the time they had gotten there, it was already too late. Their supervisor was found dead. There were no signs of foul play, and everybody was accounted for at lunch, so the company just determined it to be a workplace accident. To save you from boredom, I will say that over the summer of 1921, there were several more close calls and people reporting to hear crying coming from the tunnels of the mill. Mostly in the tunnel that was dug underground towards the river so that water from the river could freely flow in. In the fall of 1921, a young worker named Mike was completing some rebar work on the upper levels of the mill. It was nearing dark early now due to daylight savings. Mike and his co-worker were trying to finish up a few things so they could call it a day and head home. They were just about done when Mike noticed something out of the corner of his eye. He turned to look in the direction of the part of the mill known as the tower, and he could see a reflection up there that he thought might have been the sun setting. But after looking a bit closer, he realized there were two glowing objects. At this point, Mike's co-worker noticed the same thing too, and also stopped working. He asked Mike what it was, in which Mike replied that it looked like a set of glowing red eyes. His co-worker told him to stop being so foolish and help clean up their work area so they could be finished for the day. But Mike, being young and bold, began to head towards the set of eyes. Mike's co-worker was eager to get out of there, so he went back to tidying up and chose to ignore Mike. At this point, a few moments had passed, so his co-worker turned around to see where Mike had gone, and as he turned around, he seen Mike standing in the tower. He asked Mike what he was doing, but before he got an answer, it looked as though Mike was pushed down the hole at the center of the tower floor, falling 100 feet to his death. The death was ruled as a suicide due to that fact that despite Mike's co-worker seeing him being pushed and reported a pair of red eyes in the tower prior, there was no one found to be in the area. It turns out that most of their fellow co-workers had already left for the day. Given these circumstances, both the authorities and the company ruled out foul play. The mill never did see its opening day. Mostly everyone says it was due to the fact that the company encountered financial problems and were forced to declare bankruptcy. Others say it was because the mill became too big of a liability for the company due to all of the events that took place. Once the company pulled out, no other company wanted to inherit the debt, so the government declared that the area just wasn't feasible to warrant a pulp and paper mill. So production was permanently halted. Tonight, as I write this, the mill is still standing, never to be completed. Both the exterior and interior walls have since been spray painted by local artists and travelers who have visited the area. The old mill has drawn the attention of international tourist groups, and in the last few years, a satanic cult from the States even held a gathering inside the old mill and performed some sort of ritual. One thing I can safely say is that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that there are several more stories about encounters people have had with red eyes over the years. I used to walk the nearby trails as a kid, and it never bothered me. Recently, though, I decided to walk the path with my daughter, and when the mill came into sight, she began to cry and told me she wanted to turn around and go home because she didn't want to go near the scary place. This immediately sent chills down my spine because no one has told her any stories about the old mill. After all, she's only 3 years old. To this day, I avoid the place now, no matter if it's daylight or dark. I still think back to my Boulder days when my friends and I would have parties at the mill. We would have fires, play some music, drink, and just have a good time. One of the last mill parties I went to, I swear that while walking away from the concrete structure, I heard a faint scream. And when I turned around to see if one of my friends were too drunk and tripped up in a rock or something, what I saw to this day still haunts me. As we were walking away, all I could see looking down at us from the tower were a pair of red eyes. So finding this story was really cool. It actually took me a lot of digging. I searched through No Sleep on Reddit, and I managed to find a few stories from Newfoundland, and I stumbled upon this one, and it was really well written. So I got in contact with Sparks92, the Reddit user who had posted it, and I ended up getting in contact with him, learning his name was Brandon Sparks, and he agreed to do an interview with me. So up next, here we got an interview with Brandon Sparks. Did you hear stories about it when you were just a small child, or did you start hearing about it once you got older? The red eyes.
It was pretty much when I was like in kindergarten. My cousins used to tell me stories about it and try to scare me and keep me away from the mill. And they would talk about their times at the old mill and stuff that happened to them, and always reports of the glowing eyes up in the tower.
Did you believe it all?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm always been like superstitious type thing, so the stories they told and stuff they used to tell me and stuff sort of like kept me away from there. And the worst part is my house is literally like a 2-minute walk from the old mill. I live on the same street, so my bedroom window growing up, I could look out it and see the old mill at nighttime, so it added to it.
One thing that actually I've been thinking about after reading your post is what actually brought you to want to write the post? Because I guess when I was looking around for info about red eyes, the story in general, most of the stuff I found online was actually pretty vague. I had to dig pretty deep to find your No Sleep post. So I guess what made you want to type that all up?
Well, I've always been like interested in Newfoundland, like I guess ghost stories and such, and I'm a big like scary story lover myself, and I always enjoyed writing. So I thought a lot of people made comments about there was not many stories out there and so many different stories. So I sort of wanted to collaborate all the stuff that I heard growing up into one story and tell the story that I've come to know.
I think you did a really good job of doing that. That was something I was really hoping to find when I started digging for the story, and you definitely like encapsulated it pretty well, I think. And that mill, that ended up getting shut down. How long into the construction did that get shut down?
So what had happened, the company that ran the mill or owned it was Abitibi, or I believe that's the name of the company, and they ran into some financial problems during the construction of the mill and along with some other things. And they sold it to another company here in Newfoundland, and their plans was to generate it into the pulp and paper mill similar to the one that was in Grand Falls and Corner Brook, to sort of continue on, I guess, more eastern, but it never did get up and running.
And has there ever been any attempts to like, did people want to, I guess, take down the building, the city? Did they ever want to renovate it or anything, or?
Well, there about 10, 12 years ago, they decided to make a walking trail around the mill, and actually they put up, invested some money, put some signs up to sort of tell the background, the history of the old mill, and that sort of fell apart. Nothing came about it, like it never went any further than that. There about a year ago now, the town realized that it's becoming more of a liability. A lot of reports of teenagers up there climbing up on the upper towers and such and getting stuck up there. So local fire guys had to go up a few times and rescue people in the basket and such. So there this year, they erected a fence around the entire perimeter of the mill to keep people out and I guess to cover the town's liability there.
The teenagers that get stuck up there. Uh, I'm curious because I remember that you mentioned the tower itself in your story, and I guess this kind of relates to another question I'll ask you in a minute here. But this tower that you saw the red eyes from, and that the kids are getting stuck in, how tall is it? And exactly how would they end up climbing up in this tower? Is this like I guess, where all the smoke comes from in the mill?
Yeah, it would have been the smokestack. There used to be a ladder on the side that ran right from the ground right up to the top of the tower, and they would climb up that way. So eventually they took down half the ladder so that it was no longer accessible, but people used to bring up their own makeshift ladders and such and sort of connect it to that and just keep on going up from there. And yeah, and that's the same tower that the reports of the red eyes would be from.
Gotcha. So, like, how tall up is this? Say, if you were standing in front of the mill, and thinking back to when you saw a pair of red eyes when you were walking away, how high up is that?
I would imagine 80 feet maybe. It's pretty far up. It's a big structure.
So I'm guessing those eyes, they almost must have been pretty bright red, the way they're glowing, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's just like a deep red, like you could see it just coming from the tower.
Is there any kind of a light you might be able to like compare it to?
Sort of like I don't know if you know, like a red reflector type when a light catches it. Sort of like that type of red.
Oh, gotcha. So when you saw it, how long did you see the eyes?
It was quite a while. I can remember being up there in high school, and it was a local hangout place. We used to go up there on weekends, get away from the outskirts of town, I guess. And there was times I'd be walking home, and just the street between the mill and my house there, it's about, like I said before, 2-minute walk. So the entire length, you can see the tower while walking, and as I was walking home, you could still see it there. There's also a lot of people believe that some of the local teenagers back in the day may have put like reflectors and stuff up there too, just to sort of add to the story.
Gotcha. I was wondering if there was any like local skepticism of what people could have been seeing. So I guess that's probably like the common sort of thing people say.
Yeah.
So your cousins, the stories that they would tell you as a kid, so did they have any experiences themselves with the red eyes? Any interesting or specific ones?
One that sticks out, there's a place near the lower base of the tower there. They call it Hell Tunnel. It's actually written on it. I don't know if it's still written there. And there would be reports going in around there, and they would see the lights or the red eyes peering out from those tunnels and that too. And my cousin talks about one time he was up there at night and there was no one with him, and he would go up there and he would hear noises in there, and sort of like sketched him out and made him stay away from the building.
Oh man, that's some creepy stuff. The very first time that you saw the eyes, do you remember the first time?
Probably would have been around grade 3. I can remember being up there, just me and my friends fooling around. We just go up since it was so close to the house, and it was late one night, and one of my friends that were with me said, "Look up," and that's when we seen them, and we started heading back to the house. And I can remember even now looking back and still seeing the lights. Well, I call it lights because that's what the town tells us it is, whether it is or not.
Yeah, I guess so. It's whether you call it eyes or lights, it's a thing that people have been seeing, and nobody knows exactly what it is. And that leads me to another question here. What do you think they might be? Do you have any thoughts?
It's easy to believe, like some of the stories I heard, that the older generation put stuff up there just to play with the generations that come after. But a part of me, like, I believe in ghosts and I believe in spirits and such. Yes, it's not the stuff we see on movies and stuff, but I still believe in something there. So I think if there was something that drastic that occurred there, there's probably some form of spirit around the premise.
It definitely makes sense. So, I remember in your story that you said you took your daughter walking there pretty recently. Like, this was in the past few years, I believe you wrote the post. I don't remember the date that you wrote it. Do you remember when that was?
Yeah. That's about 2 years ago now. Now my daughter, she's currently 7, so she was probably around 5 at the time. And we went up for the day, my wife and my 2 kids, and we were up swimming. And at the end of the day, it started getting dark, and we're walking back, and that's when she was always talking about the creepy building. She's like, "That's the creepy building with the man that lives there," and she talks about seeing stuff up there. And there was another occurrence that she went to go up there with my aunt, and they got, say, with 50 feet within the building, and she cried to go home. She said she don't want to go back there. The man lives there.
That is creepy stuff. Do you know if there's been any sightings of the lights or the red eyes in recent years, or was this mostly a thing from like the 50s to the 90s?
Matter of fact, they're about, I would say within the last year. My cousin, she's a bit younger than me, her and her boyfriend went up the Plant Road, is what we call it, in their pickup truck, and as they were coming back down, they can see a glowing coming from the tower there. And she took a picture. I will look and see if I can find it for you after and send it through Discord. And you can see something up there, and it's pretty spooky. Like, it encouraged her to get out of there, let's say.
Oh wow, that is super cool. If you could send that, that'd be awesome.
One little interesting fact for you there: about 5 years actually, the old mill, I guess the Red Eye story somehow gained a bit of international following, and there was some form like a church cult thing that visited the mill one night.
Right.
And there was like a ritual up there, and a few of my friends just showed up to see what was on the go there, because there was posters put around the town saying "show up at twilight," and there was like these animal heads and stuff written in red paint, and there was this like some sort of leader there performing a ceremony of sort in a concert. So it was a bit weird. The police had to show up and shut it down.
That's one of the craziest parts of the story to me, that they ended up coming all the way for that. Man, this is a really cool story. I think I'm gonna wrap it up there.
All right.
Awesome. Well, Brandon,
All right.
again, thanks so much, man.
No problem. You have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
And thanks for tuning in to another episode of Bizarre Newfoundland, everybody. I appreciate you being here. We upload at least 3 videos a week. Mondays, we do True Stories of Newfoundland. Wednesdays, we do Your Chilling Encounters, which is stories from you guys featuring interviews from you guys. And on Fridays, we do Entities of the Island, Ghost Stories of Newfoundland. And we also do random uploads throughout the week, so look out for those too. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Bizarre Newfoundland. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I am your host, Cody O'Quinn, and I will see you guys next time. Well, hopefully.